Hi, I'm Richard Garner, and this is History Talk, Episode 1, Season 1. For those of you who do not know, I am not only a history fanatic, I am a Fallout 4 addict. And I just want to talk about one of my favorite fractions in the Fallout franchise. You guessed it, it's right above my head, the Minutemen. It is really weird to think that video games can take something from history and put it and make it entertaining. No, it's not. People take things from history to make movies, TV shows, and video games very entertaining. Which is why I have to laugh at people who think history class is dumb. Now, I want to apologize for the poor quality of this video right off the bat. This is the video I've been telling you was going to be made about a year ago. Exactly a year ago. Last month. And I'm sorry about that. And with that in mind, let's move on. So, today we will be discussing Fallout 4 versus Real, the Minutemen. This is going to be part of like a series I want to try, where I take and historically compare the different fractions of Fallout across the video games, excluding 1 and 2, because the PC I had that on is completely gone. Yeah, I guess I could watch different gameplay about Fallout 1 and 2, and there are a bunch of people who do that. My personal favorite is the Oxhorn. You can check him out. Just type in Oxhorn Fallout into YouTube after you're done with this video. And who knows, maybe one of his videos is on that little sidebar of recommendations. Anyway, onward. When comparing Fallout 4 Minutemen to the regular Minutemen, is not just in the name. There are many similarities between these two groups. They're individuals who rose up at a minute's notice to defend different settlements across the Commonwealth. As you know, the old saying goes, another settlement needs your help, another settlement needs your help, another settlement needs your help. Shut up, Preston! And those of you who played Fallout 4 know what I'm talking about. This is going to be a short look at the similarities and differences. One difference is the single-shot laser musket, which is like a little crank toy that shoots exactly 1 round of laser. I personally hate laser muskets. I personally hate lasers in Fallout. Because who wants an ineffective flashlight? My weapon of choice is the plasma gun. But I digress. A similarity would be the single-shot muzzle loader used by the Minutemen. These were smoothbore muzzle loaders that were issued to them by the British, by the state, or their hunting rifles if they're not officially the state militia. Now, these muzzleloaders, much like the Fallout 4 single-shot muskets, are incredibly ineffective. They have a short effective range. Once they are out of that effective range, the ball, which is just a little round piece of lead, would shoot across the battlefield and just go off in any direction. That's one of the reasons why we have these sort of phalanx formations in 19th century and 18th century combat. Also, the uniforms. Now, in the Minutemen, unless you modded it, there are different variations of the uniform, but the most commonly used uniform is that snot green looking jacket and the cowboy hat looking tricorner that they just basically took a fedora and lightly folded the ends of them. And one of the uniform types you see is the one that Garvey wears, which is fairly close to the original uniform worn by Commonwealth Minutemen back in the time of the American Revolution. Except it has that Australian-looking hat, which I personally think is cool, and there were types of that hat used during the actual American Revolution. In the real Minutemen, of course, you had the colonial militia, which their uniforms were brown with red trim around the buttons and a red collar. That was for the regular Minutemen. The Minutemen that we tend to think of, especially in the statue behind me, am I poking at it? Yeah. Wore their regular clothes. They wore jackets, and they wore their tricorners or their straw hats. And that's the big difference. Now, in the video game, you have those different Minutemen that wear more Wastelander-esque clothes. In the base game, unless you, again, modded your game, which, thank God for mods. And also, the Minutemen of the American Revolution and the colonial period of American history were established to protect against Native American raids and different issues across their individual territories. Now, the Minutemen and militia concept is not new to colonial America. It's existed for as long as communities have come together. The colony of Virginia had their own militia. Colony of the Carolinas had their militia. Georgia had their militia. Delaware had their militia. And whether you admit it or not, all the different fractions sort of had a militia of their own throughout the video games. You had the Rangers, which were basically the first NCR troopers that are able to deploy. And yeah, they're based loosely on the Army Rangers, but we will get to that later. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts has the Minutemen, which basically protects settlements from every kind of raid. They protect them from raiders, which is a fraction in Fallout franchise for those of you who are not familiar. Of course, I'd be surprised if you're watching this and you weren't familiar with that. And they protected from super mutants, the gunners, and Mirelurks, which is kind of ironic that Mirelurks basically took over their HQ. And what are the other similarities? Oh, before, it was an alarm rider that would ride out and inform the townsfolk to turn out their militia, in which case everyone grab your muskets, it's going down. In Fallout 4, they use a flare gun to signal for help. Or they send word with passing traders. That's the difference I see there. Where before, when another settlement or somebody on watch saw something go down, or saw Indians forming along the settlement to raid it, they would go out and alert the militia to their presence. There weren't no real flare guns in the American Revolution colonial period. And other similarities are, these are farmers who basically come out to protect themselves and their neighbors and their neighboring communities. That's a similarity between them. Another similarity is that there's constant threat. I know that's a given. In colonial America, they were basically carving a nation out of a colony out of a wilderness. There was no concept of an American nation at that time, regardless of what people were saying. The Minutemen, another similarity, fought the Institute. And depending on how you played the game, would fight the Brotherhood of Steel. Get to that later. The Minutemen of Fallout 4, originally, yeah, they were to protect settlements, protect settlers, but eventually kind of formed into this sort of group that had to fight against the Institute. Where before, the Institute was basically an unknown. They didn't know where the Institute was, no one did. They weren't considering fighting in the Institute. They were mainly there to protect the Commonwealth. They weren't interested in the preservation of technology like the Brotherhood of Steel was. They are not interested in conquering the Commonwealth as the Institute was, and their primary goal wasn't just to protect synths, but to protect the Commonwealth, much like the Railroad does. To find out more about that, again, play the games, look it up on YouTube, and we will be doing videos on them later on, hopefully, I guess. And similarity to the reality is, again, protecting against raids from Native American tribals, and that eventually changed as we get into the American Revolution aspect. At the time of Lexington and Concord, which just celebrated its 244th anniversary, it became a fight against the British Empire. A fight that no one really wanted, that no one really considered. The British Empire was trying to impose their will on the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The Minutemen, up to that point, were not a rebellion. They were not rising up against the British. They were simply rising up to protect their town. That's why they were at Boston Common. The whole reason that Rufus Dawes and Paul Revere went on their midnight ride was to warn the militia that the regulars were coming. Not the redcoats, as the nursery rhyme and the different iterations of this story would tell you. They went out, they warned the militia turned out, waiting for the British to show up, who were off to secure arms and munitions that were being held at certain locations in Concord. It was not a delaying tactic for the militia unit, for the rebels to hide their munitions and to, it was basically a group of individuals who came out to protect their town and probably to see why the British were marching on Lexington. No one wanted to fire the first shot. No one really knows who fired the first shot. All we can agree on, it started them on that road to revolution. And now we associate those Minutemen, those colonial militiamen, as rebels. It is often said that the British massacred them at Lexington, forcing the Minutemen to retreat to Concord. That is far against the case. The orders were to not harass the local population. The British beat to formation, meaning they took up their position, because they saw a group of armed individuals in front of them, which so would you, if you were trained and were under orders, you would do the same thing. To defend yourself, to defend your fellow soldier next to you. At this point, it doesn't really matter who fired first. The shot heard around the world was heard. And the Minutemen, the Massachusetts Bay Militia, became rebels, and they changed from protecting settlements and farms from Native American raids to fighting the British, to fighting the Redcoats, the regulars. This was the equivalent of the National Guard going up against the regular army. And where the Minutemen of the Fallout 4 franchise, as we stated, originally were not going to fight the Institute. Originally weren't going to fight the Brotherhood of Steel. They were going to protect and defend the Commonwealth. It was up to us as the protagonist, depending on which fraction you went with, to decide we're going to fight the Institute because they're taking over the Commonwealth. They're a threat. We need to deal with that threat. And we have to take care of the Brotherhood of Steel. They're stealing from farmers. They're rough arming their way through the Commonwealth. They're a threat too. It's just that transgression that's very similar to each other. And I think that's where it hits me the most, in the similarity between the Commonwealth Minutemen of Fallout 4 and the Massachusetts Bay Minutemen of the American Revolution colonial period, is that it goes progressively from an organization designed to serve and protect individual settlements from raids by groups of people who want what that settlement has or want to wipe out that settlement. And then we have that transgression from protectors and individuals to that militant aspect where we see a threat bigger than ourselves. And we need to defend against it. For the Commonwealth Minutemen, it was the Institute. For the Massachusetts Bay Colony Minutemen, it was the British Army. Two groups that were infringing on civil liberties, who controlled a vast number of resources, were stronger than them, And depending on your playthrough, both groups wipe the floor with them. The Minutemen of Fallout franchise is just as resourceful as their predecessors. They were able to adapt and overcome their enemy, which is another similarity. But you see that in every group, you say. You see that in the NCR army. You see that in Caesar's Legion. You see that in the Brotherhood of Steel. Everyone adapts to their surroundings. But yes. But in this case, this is an exercise of historical analysis. It is very similar. Sorry, I can't think of better words to describe this. The Minutemen of Fallout 4 are exactly like the Minutemen of reality. That settled an argument me and my friend had earlier. How the Minutemen of Fallout 4 are not even compatible with the Minutemen of the American Revolution, and I argued against that fact. Historically and individually, they are very similar in type. They're raised at a minute's notice to defend and protect the people of the Commonwealth. And they both groups had to adapt and defend against a larger force, both the Brotherhood of Steel and the Institute. The only difference is in time and methodology and technology. A laser musket, despite being a piece of junk, is way different than a single shot muzzle loading black powder rifle. That snot green color jacket is very different from the brown and red jacket, but the similarities are more. And with that being said, no matter what playthrough I do, and I just started a new playthrough of Fallout 4, I will always side with the Minutemen, because they have the best interests of the Commonwealth. They're, in my opinion, the greatest fraction in the Commonwealth. Simply because they're not a bunch of outsiders coming in on a big flying ship, telling the Commonwealth to not interfere with their operations, and if you have a piece of technology, hand it over, and you need to give us food or else we'll just take over your farm. And they're not trying to replace people. They're not trying to infiltrate anybody like the Institute and the Railroad does, to an extent. They're not spies like the Railroad. They're not bullies like the Brotherhood of Steel. And they're not selfish and arrogant like the Institute is. They're completely selfless, which is another similarity. They don't think about themselves. They think about the people of the Commonwealth. They think about the people they swore to protect. They think about their families, their neighbors. They want to make the Commonwealth safer for everybody. That is why the Minutemen of Fallout franchise is my absolute favorite franchise. Is my absolute favorite fraction, because they are not in it for themselves. They don't want to build a huge nation. They don't want to control everything. They don't want to overthrow people. They don't want to infiltrate and assassinate people. They just want to live their lives, protect themselves, their family, their neighbors. It's also why I really like the Minutemen of the American Revolution, colonial period America. It's just the selflessness. There's not many people in the world that are selfless, especially in the Fallout universe. It's just a refreshing change. And I've always been a big Fallout fan. I played Fallout 1 on PC when I was a kid. I played Fallout 2 when it came out when I was a kid on PC. I played Fallout 3. I've played Fallout New Vegas. I've played Fallout Tactics. God, Tactics sucked. I don't care who you are. And I've played Fallout 4, and Fallout 4 is, because of the Minutemen, is now my absolute favorite Fallout. That and you get to build settlements, which is really cool. And that's exactly like what would happen in colonial America. These people literally went from farming, building their houses. The next thing you know, some guy rides up saying, "Come on, there's an Indian attack." Okay. And I like how Preston is like, he's not only a companion, but he gives you missions to do. There's a never-ending puddle of Minuteman missions you could do. Which is why we always at least do some of the Minutemen missions. I've done every single mission he has. When I do that, I start another playthrough purely for the idea of doing the missions for the Minutemen. They're the best way to level up. They're interesting, they're challenging in many ways, and they're relevant to what's going on in the world around you. The Brotherhood of Steel, they want you to teach, spoiler alert, they want you to teach their young people how to exterminate the mutant filth. They want you to gather technology. They want you to help build Liberty Prime. And although I love Liberty Prime, I love his anti-commie sentiment. Death is a preferable alternative to communism. I just loved that when I played Fallout 3. It was sad to see that poor boy blown up. And the Institute, it was basically stay out of our way. We're taking over whether you like it or not. You're going to do what we say. We're going to replace whoever we want. And the railroad, don't get me wrong, I think what they're doing is very noble. It's very similar to what the Underground Railroad during the 1800s was doing. Liberating sins. But that's where their interest in the world ends. Well, what happens to these sins once they're out of the Commonwealth? What happens to the people that get hurt along the way getting these people out? What happens to the agents that get caught by the Institute? None of them really care. One that really stuck with me was when you had to go find this agent called Blackburn. You find out he's dead. Spoiler. Should have said that earlier, huh? And you go back, and they're all talking about maybe Desmond will listen to us this time, and blah, 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 blah. There's no real remorse about the agent who lost his life, and I get that. They expect, with the danger level, they expect that to happen. The Minutemen, it's really, this is just sad and wrong. Why didn't you go on that mission? Why didn't you rescue that settler? Why didn't you make it to that settlement on time? Why are those settlers starving? Why is that settlement not well defended? They're questioning your morality. which in the Nuka-Cola DLC, which I have not personally played. I know, years after the DLC was launched, I still haven't played it. Well, you try working minimum wage and having to get to college, which I'm sure some of you may. Preston Garvey just loses all admiration for you. He still gives you missions, but there's a certain level of, how dare you? So realistically, the Fallout franchise with the Minutemen, it's perfect. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. The similarities, this video is hard to make because there's so many more similarities between these two groups, which I'm glad to see a video game actually get like on the dot similarities together like that. This has been more like a video game analysis than a historical analysis, and I just realized that. I apologize for that. But it's an interesting subject. These videos are more like to touch on a subject. I'm not making these to like give you this wealth of information so you can go out and make your own judgments, so you can go out and make your own assumptions. I'm making these videos because of that. Really. I'm presenting you a problem, much like another settlement needs your help, just as an interesting talking point. This is me rambling. This is not scripted. This is not something that I've planned out, except for the topic, of course. I've played the game for about 72 hours in the last month. Again, I work, I go to school. If I had more time to play it, I would. I played the game all day yesterday because I had finally gotten a day off. And yeah, if you like people, fractions, and video games that touch on the more human-esque aspect of what's going on in the world, I totally tell you to go with the Minutemen. They're selfless. They're not in it for themselves, which falls under selfless. And they're just a fascinating fraction. I wish there was more fractions in the Fallout universe that were like this. It's the same reason I like the Minutemen of the colonial period. The similarities between them are just amazing. And we all know, if you're a history buff, and you like video games, and you like movies and TV shows, we all know that the TV shows, the video games, the movies, they never get these similarities right. There's always something left out. There's always something this. Aesthetically, with the laser musket, with the black powder musket, with the uniforms, with the different kinds of people, yeah, there's those differences. But those are the only differences I was able to see. And if I missed something, if I missed any differences, please let me know. Because that's what's going to make these videos, my channel, better. Now, this is around the end of this is the end of the video. I'm sorry that it was mostly me rambling, and I'm sorry that it was mostly me talking about the Minutemen of Fallout 4 more than the Minutemen of reality. But that's just the way the news goes, man. And I'm going to be doing another video, historical analysis. I'm going to try and push for more history in the next episode. The next episode, I'm debating on whether or not to launch next week or the week after next. This may be an every 2 weeks kind of thing with me. Because quite simply, I go to school and I work. The only reason I've been able to do this film is because this is the first time in almost a year, I've actually had time to breathe. It's right in the middle of the semester. Everything's winding down. We had midterms like 2 weeks ago. We have finals in 3 weeks, which is why I'm thinking maybe I should do these every other week instead of every week. If you have a suggestion, please put it in the comment section, and stay tuned to this channel for more. The name may change. I'm not sure yet. And you can like us on Facebook at America's Historical Roundtable, which we post historical content from other Facebook pages and blogs every day, at least once or twice a day. And it's just interesting, and there's a good community there. And I may invite you to be part of the War Room, which is a place where I discuss more than just history. We discuss video games. And you can check out some of the articles I did for History Talk, if you want to. I know that there are plenty of YouTubers that at the end of their video ask you, donate to Patreon to make this content better, or God bless you all, but most of all, send your money. That's not me. I'm not getting paid for these videos, which poor quality, you know already. I don't take Patreons. I don't ask you for donations. This is just me talking about stuff that interests me and interests you. You like video games? Then you can watch some of my gameplay and watch me suck totally on Fallout and other games. I may do a historical analysis of Call of Duty World at War, or a historical... The well is on, people. Stay tuned to this channel. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to this channel. And in the immortal words of a great Canadian comedian, those two words just belong together. Keep your stick on the ice.